Welcome into another edition of the Illini Cast. My name is Austin Berkland alongside Sunny Verma, and I should have turned my camera upside down or something because that seems to be what the situation is for the Illini. Things are in the upside down if you're a fan of Stranger Things. And right now, it's not a pleasant time to be an Illini fan, but there is a game to bounce back or at least get back into a victory column tonight, Sunny.
Yeah, I mean, you said it correctly, right? It's been such an up and down season right now, and right now things are kind of down. And what happened on Saturday just kind of encompasses everything that's been going on for, I feel like, the last 2 weeks or so. But as you said, it's Wisconsin. Illinois has had some pretty good history against Wisconsin as of late. And so who knows? Again, whenever they were thinking highly of them, they end up losing. And whenever I feel like we're at the low point, they end up coming out on top. So I'm going to be optimistic today.
Yeah, it's been like 2,100 days since the last time Wisconsin has beat the Illini in basketball, and that streak doesn't matter today. The only streak that matters is getting one win today, and that's coming on the heels of a Michigan State game where you were up 16 points earlier on, and then all of a sudden in the second half, it became a lopsided affair on the other way. You lose by 14 points, and then you get a little injury to insult Morez Johnson on that big fall. He is out for a few weeks with a wrist injury, and that's going to be with a big stretch of games coming up in the Big Ten, and then of course the game in Madison Square Garden against Duke coming up, and then Tomislav Ivisic, he's questionable tonight. We'll see if he plays. He probably won't be as effective. I think that illness is kind of battling back because of all the physical activity and everything you're doing. It's not a great thing for somebody battling with that kind of thing to keep exerting that amount of physical activity that he's been going under on the Big Ten play. So, Sonny, a lot of adversity for this Illini basketball team.
A lot, and Tommy's just one of those guys who can't seem to catch a break at this point. First he gets the flu, then mono, and then his ankle looks like a melon, and now I'm not really sure what the issue is today. But yeah, showing up questionable, on that report. But the one good thing is, like, obviously Illinois is a depleted team without either Morez or Tommy. But if I'm trying to imagine an Illinois basketball team without both big men, and all I can do is sit here and chuckle. But the one fortunate thing is the Wisconsin Badgers aren't really a team that can take advantage of you, if you're lacking bigs. They're not a very big team themselves, and so this is probably the right matchup for Illinois, in the sense where if we're going up against a Maryland or a Michigan, like later on in the season, like they would destroy whoever backups we decided to play tonight. But I think with Wisconsin, it's going to be a matchup of the wings. It's going to be Blackwell and Tanji versus Kasparis and Will Riley, and I think if, again, I hope he plays, but if he doesn't, it could just lead to an up and down game, and that's a game that Illinois on occasion can win.
Yeah, transition needs to be a huge factor in this Illini basketball attack, because we've seen when the three-pointers aren't falling, it's tough to get to the rim for these guards. Will Riley just does not have that built-in strength to battle it out in Big Ten play. Kasparis is very creative around the rim, but he's not very physical at that point of attack, and you kind of have to be. And you saw the reverse of that in the Michigan State game, where those guards were getting to the rim, and they were getting to the rim ferociously. You saw, I think it was Cohen Carr had the massive dunk from Michigan State, and that's just the kind of way that Michigan State built their lead, and they kept going to the rim. They kept going to the rim. And then Illinois, they were in the bonus for so long, and they just kept jacking up threes, not driving to the lane. It really became a disastrous recipe for the Illini, and you hope that Brad Underwood has another attack at this point in the season, and he hasn't shown that he has. So hopefully they went to the whiteboard and figured out some new screen actions, figured out some creative ways where they can create some space down in the paint and create some openings with some backdoor cuts or something. It's just been a one-trick pony for the Illini, and if that one trick isn't working, it's not useful for the Illini.
Yeah, this year again, you and I are both pro Brad Underwood people, and nothing has changed in that regard. When it comes to the big picture, but I don't mean to speak for you, but I think that game against Michigan State was clearly one of his worst performances as a head coach. Again, as you mentioned, 8.5 minutes without scoring at the end of the game, not ideal. But what makes it worse is that you were able to get to the free throw line at the 12-minute mark. With Michigan State had the 6 fouls. At that point, maybe a point is all you needed. Put your head down, attack the rim, get a foul call, and at least that stretch, you get a point, a score here. It could have broken that just whirlwind that Michigan State was, because it's not like the Spartans were scoring like crazy. It's just simply you weren't scoring yourself, and it's just I'm disappointed because as a head coach, there was no real timeout. There was no adjustment made at that point, and I actually think he's had a couple games this year where he has made adjustments, and in a way, it's I'm kind of proud of him, but just sorely lacking against Michigan State. It's a game that I don't think there's another game on the schedule that I wanted to win more. And after that hot start that Illinois was, at the beginning of the game, up 16 points at one point, and then ultimately seeing the result, and I believe we lost by 14. It still doesn't sit well with me. It's just one of those where the season's been up and down, but that one game encompassed what this entire season was like. You had the highest of highs, and then you just had the lowest of lows.
And I mean, you had some players this year that have given you a net zero at a lot of points in the season where you needed some guys to help you out. I mean, Kylan Boswell against Michigan State, 0 points. Tomislav didn't have the best game, 4 points against Michigan State, and then Ben Hummerkaus, 6 points, 0 for 6 from behind the 3 point line. I mean, there is a lot of duds in this lineup when Will Riley and Kasparis are trying to do their things. You need to help them out even just a smidge. There hasn't been a third guy at all to help take the brunt away from those two guys. I mean, you think last year when Terrence Shannon Jr. and Marcus Damask might have struggled, you might have had a Quincy Guerrier game. You might
Mm-hmm.
have.
Mm-hmm.
But this year, that Ben Hummerkaus game has only happened once, maybe twice, and I expected a lot more from a veteran like Kylan Boswell to come in and do some things. And he's just been maddeningly inconsistent throughout this season, and that needs to change, especially in this tough stretch of the season to end it. Big Ten tournament, and then going into March, where you're probably going to be a six to an 8 seed. You're going to need some players to step up, especially in a second round game, hypothetically, where you're going up against the number one overall seed. Possibly that is a big time ask for two freshmen in Kasparis and Will Riley to handle a brunt of that.
It's just a disappointing, right? Because coming into this year, we knew they were replacing 10 guys, but we talked about, hey, this could be the most talented Illinois team that we've had possibly ever, or in recent memory, and that's coming off the legs of an Elite Eight run last year. But it's just hasn't turned out that way. Kylan Boswell, like we had higher hopes for him. I'm not saying he was a disappointment or anything, but he's just kind of a player. He's probably an average all around player, whereas we had a little higher hopes for that. Ben Hummerkaus, I talked about this a little bit earlier. Like if he had come in with the expectations of being a role player off the bench, I think we'd all be satisfied. He's a big who can on occasion hit that three, and he's got length to him. He plays good help defense, not so much one on one. But he came in with the what John Fantas had called him the next Dalton Connect, and then Brad Underwood kept hyping him up the way he does all random players in the preseason.
Remember, Mark Smith is Jason Kidd.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And so I think Illini fans, me included, just kind of got fed up with that. We ate all that up, and to see the way things turned out, Tommy, God bless him, he's been one of the biggest surprises for us this year. Morez Johnson, I know we're gonna talk about him in a second. He's gotten better. I feel like with each passing week. But the role players, mainly Kylan, and what's going on with Trey White? Does anybody know? I thought he was a solid basketball player for us. I'm sure we're gonna get your thoughts about him in a second, but he's not playing anymore, and so it's just Kasparis is gonna give you all American numbers. Will Riley, as of late, is going to give you really, really good numbers. Tommy, when he's healthy, is going to give you really good numbers. And that's one heck of a three guys to start off with. But if it seems like they're just not being helped out by anyone else, and that's why Illinois tends to be in the position that they're in.
I mean, I feel like I need to go to Party City or Spirit Halloween and grab my clown nose to put on because I said this was the deepest Atlanta team in history. I mean, you looked on paper when you see a guy like Drake Gibbs coming off the bench. Whenever you have a Kerry Booth who was a role player at Notre Dame, which Notre Dame has turned into a pumpkin as of late this year. Louisville has passed them up now. You have Tomislav, you had Morez Johnson, you have Kasparis and Will Riley and Kylan Boswell, and then all of a sudden, and Trey White even, and then all of a sudden you look at the get bench against Michigan State, and they're only playing 8 guys, and that bench was Jake Davis with 8 points, Will Riley with 13, and Dre Gibbs with 0. And again, Trey White is like Carmen Sandiego at this point. Where is he? What's
Yeah.
going on? Is it a disciplinary thing? Is it a health thing? Because he's not on the injury list right now. He's had to have done something where the treadmill has been his best friend in practice, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But I don't know. Like it is so crazy to think of how slim this team is right now with 2 guys really carrying the brunt of it. Tomislav's sickness has just been a big wart on this Illini season. I think there's a lot of what if there where Tomislav could have developed a rhythm and probably been at his best at this point. But again, Morez Johnson is probably a guy that I have the most like hyped about. But then again, the wrist injury pops up after one of his best games. I mean, there's no question why Tom Izzo was doing all that he could to hype up Morez Johnson after that game because he is a Michigan State type player.
Mhm.
And so it just is frustrating that there's this void of physicalness on this team and a void of on the court leadership because it's not fair to Gasparis and it's not fair to Will Riley to be the leaders on a team when they haven't experienced much of what college basketball is like. And you have Kylan Boswell jacking up shots, turning the ball over. There's some questionable defensive plays by Kylan as well. And then you have Dre Gibbs, who just gets in foul trouble way too much as a bench player, even. So many question marks on this team on February 18th, where you thought that the progression would have just been a straight line after that Oregon game. But as Theo Epstein said in 2015 and 2016, that progression is not always linear. I think we are seeing that as Illini fans for the first time with such a young team.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of see, Brad's strategy of, revamping the roster. Some guys left. It wasn't necessarily his fault, but you can see the downside of it. Yeah, maybe the talent grade has been elevated a little bit, but when you replace 10 guys, there really is a leadership void in that locker room. I'm sure he assumed Ty Rodgers would take on that mantle of being a leader, and he is. But how much of a leader can you be from the bench when you're wearing street clothes?
And when you're quit on the team, essentially, I mean, you can call it what you want, but it is quitting on the team knowing that you aren't going to be a big time player. And I think Ty is kind of shooting himself in the foot. I would think right now because he would have been a massive player on this team with all the injuries that have happened and just the inconsistencies on defense. He would have been a big time player on this team, and that would have been a NCAA tournament teams once again for Ty Rodgers to be a part of. And right now, he's not a part of it. Who knows where he goes from here, though?
See, I wonder if that's right though, because if I think about it, it's why is Trey White not allegedly playing? It's it depends on who you listen to. It's because he can't hit the 3-point shot. His outside shot, I believe he's shooting 24% from 3-point land. Earlier in the season, Trey White was doing everything Ty Rodgers is providing on the basketball court, and minus the leadership, of course. But when it comes to basketball skill wise, I'd argue that possibly Trey White is an upgrade over Ty. And so I do wish Ty was a little bit more open about this. And, again, I genuinely do think the staff was blindsided by this and, didn't really have time to prepare. If they had, maybe they could have gotten an alternate route or brought in a different type of player. But, if Trey White right now is not playing after the type of I couldn't imagine Ty Rogers, sorry, giving you a 17-7 like Trey White was giving you earlier in the season. So I think Ty probably made the right choice for himself, just because of the team that he's on and how Brad just seems to be super stubborn in this analytics game that he wants to play. But Austin, when I see Ty Rogers next year lining up at East Lansing, or wearing that dark green and white, oh my God, that's gonna hurt right in the chest.
Yeah, I mean, if Illinois fans thought Luke Goody playing on Indiana was difficult, I don't think they're ready for what Ty Rogers is going to bring to another Big Ten roster, and that will sting. You are right, Sonny. It's gonna be crushing, and you got to hope that Illinois is going to be at a point next year where they're not reloading 10 guys, where there's going to be some continuity, where it's not going to be just a constant bludgeoning in Big Ten play where it's like, oh man, who's scoring here? What are we doing defensively? And you're losing by 14 points whenever you were up 16 and being 6.5 point favorites. I mean, I really hope next year's roster is a little bit more consistent than what this year brought from the offseason. But I mean, in this world of college basketball and how kind of bad it's going this season, you don't maybe it doesn't transition as easily as we initially anticipated starting this season where we're already thinking of next year's roster.
So speaking of next year's roster, Austin, I'm curious. Okay, I actually did a segment of this on Locked On Illini. Look at our roster right now, and how many of those guys are you confident will be coming back next year? Because when I went through the roster, the more I thought about it, it's like there's a chance that we do this all over again next year. So I'm very curious on your points. Let's just say 1 to 5. 5 is the most confident. A 4 or higher for you.
All right, let's go through the roster here from points per game of this year. Kasparis, he will be gone. He'll be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. That's a 0 out of 5. Tomislav Ivisic could get a second round grade. I'm going to go 2.3 out of 5 that he will come back. Just because if you have a second round grade, possibly, I think that could make sure that you go to the NBA draft. You have that opportunity. Will Riley,
So just so we get the scoring correctly. So 2.3 means you're 50-50 on Tommy.
yeah, I think that could be either way because there are some things that he will have to work on, especially defensively and physicality wise. But again, sometimes you're like Georgie Bashanishvili, where he's
Yeah.
like, "All right, I'm ready to get out of here.
Yeah.
I've already played European ball. I've played this college basketball. They call it in America. I'm ready to move on." That could be a possibility there. Will Riley, I'm leaning towards a 1. I think he'll take his shot, especially if he's getting top 20 grades in the mock draft process. Kylan Boswell, I think he's a 4 out of 5 right now. I don't know what other team would want him. I mean, there's going to be teams that want him, of course, but who can offer an opportunity like Illinois has next year, especially with how open this roster could be. Trey White, 1.9 out of 5 right now. Like he seems like he's in Brad Underwood's doghouse, and it's awfully tough to get out of Brad's doghouse until you leave. And then you're like Sky Clark, where Brad really appreciates the time, but whenever you're on that roster and you're in the doghouse, pretty much stay there for the eternity of your Illini career. And so I'm going 1.9 for him. Ben Hummerkaus, I think if that NAIA thing happens, there's a possibility there. But does Brad Underwood just be like, see ya? Like, I don't know if he'll want him back with what he's brought. Morez, I think that's a 5 out of 5. I think he is going to be your star of returning players on next year's roster. Dre Gibbs, I'm going to go 2.7 out of 5. I think he loves Champagne. I think him and Kylan are going to determine who stays and who goes, kind of thing. But that's difficult. That's a difficult one. Jake Davis, he is a senior, correct? Or does he have some years of eligibility? I forgot.
Yeah, he'll be a junior next year. He's a
Yeah, he'll be
sophomore.
back. 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
Kerry Booth, I mean, this isn't what he signed up for. This isn't what he signed up for at all. He thought he was going to be a solid rotation player, and that's not to be the case. And then finally, Keaton Kutcher, Ashton's cousin. No, AJ Red, who cares? With all due respect, but Not a lot of over 2.5s in there. So maybe this is going to be just a repeat, and you bring in this Italian group from Italy, and you bring in some transfers and your recruiting class, and roll the ball out again. Let's see what happens. I mean, Illinois is kind of turning into an AAU program as we speak, and it's not like Purdue. I'll tell you that much. Purdue's kind of just has a well-oiled factory right now, and Illinois is just kind of importing parts as they need.
It's exactly right. So, I mean, you had essentially the same results of that exercise that I did. And it's one thing for me. Again, I'm a Brad Underwood defender, and I gave him that leash this year because he's revamping the roster so drastically. And my thinking is, and I said this on this show, I've said this on my other show, Locked On Line. I've said, hey, look, we're going to be an up and down season this year, but next year we're going to have a senior Kylan Boswell. We're going to have a senior Trey White. We're going to, at that point, looks like we're going to bring Ben Humringhouse back. Sophomore year, Morez Johnson. For me, like I was like, that's going to be a deep team, and that's going to be a team that's has 2 years of experience playing together. And if Brad can hit the home run like he did this year with like a guy like Kasparis and possibly like a Will Riley, I mean, I know it's hard to find these guys, but Brad's proven that he can. Well, then next year's team absolutely is capable of winning the national title. Now, all those guys I listed, I don't know if any of them are coming back. If you told me right now, the only guy I'm almost like 90% sure, if not more, that is coming back is Jake Davis. Outside that, everyone
You
else.
don't have that same confidence in Morez.
I'm confident Morez is coming back, but he seems very loyal, right? But again, with the modern day college basketball world, let's be honest, who was he recruited by? Tim Anderson. If all of a sudden Tim Anderson gets a job somewhere else as an assistant coach, is there a chance that Tim, tells Morris, hey, I got a starting spot for you right over here. Look, it's not working out for you. I know you're doing fine at Illinois, but Brad's up and down with his roster, this and that. I'll give you consistency. Why don't you follow me over here? The one thing Tim Anderson was fantastic with, and he continues to be, is relationships. You can tell the players he recruits really look at him as a mentor, as like a second father figure. And so, again, I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm not going to lie. Like, I do have thoughts in the background that did we see the last of Morez Johnson in an Illini uniform when he went down against Michigan State? But yeah, so I mean, Ben Humringhouse, it's not even does Brad want him back. I'm sure you heard the words that Ben said at church just over this past Sunday, where he's talking about, I know a lot of you don't like me right now. If Ben is entering his final year of college basketball, he might decide he doesn't want to deal with this sort of environment anymore. He might just be like, hey, I got 1 year left. Maybe I do just need to drop down a level, score 20 points a game, go all conference and at least be celebrated instead of just all the pressure that's come with him to Champaign this year. So, all these guys have question marks for me. The only one who I'm very confident coming back next year is Jake Davis.
Yeah, I mean, and he might be a little bit of a hippie because of his hair. Who knows? He could be like, "Hey, I want to go to the beach." I don't know. But yes, this is just a weird situation that I did not anticipate being in February. I thought the machine was well oiled, like Purdue's is. That we're going to be like, okay, next 3 years, it's going to be easy. Get the top European player. Get a few of the top 20 transfers out there, and then recruit at your high level with some depth guys on your roster. And right now, that's not the case at the moment. I mean, it's like Mike Tyson always says: everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And right now, Illinois has been punched in the face hard. Let's go to the comments of Illini Cast, part of Armchair Illini Network. Philip says Wisconsin bigs are slight in size. That's right. It's going to be that 2-on-2 matchup. Will Riley and Kasparis going up against Tanji as well of Wisconsin. Philip, do you know who's starting tonight? I am not seeing a starting lineup tweeted out or put on Facebook or anything. We will check out that. Returners next year, Philip says, are Boswell, Ivasic, Morez, DGL, Rogers and Davis. I think Rogers is supremely out of the fold here. I think if Visic could be like Georgie, as I said earlier in the show, Kylan Boswell and DGL might battle it out of who's coming back out of the two once off-season workouts and the exit interviews happen for the year. I think that's what makes sense to me. I don't know if you agree with that, Sonny.
Yeah. Again, the whole situation is just kind of confusing. I just did a quick search for the starting lineup. Tommy's dressed, but he's sitting on the bench. Like
Oh, fun.
he's not jacking up shots with the rest of the team. So I wanted to see if I can find the answer real quick for Philip, but I don't see it yet. But again, it's going to be tough. We might have to play without Morez and Tomasov today.
Kerry Booth, this is your breakout game. This is where you prove the haters wrong, prove Brad Underwood wrong for never playing you. This is your opportunity. But really, Kerry Booth against a Big Ten opponent for the first time, that's going to be difficult. Kirkland says, tournament outlook. What's up, guys? He's from Armchair Illini Network. Be sure to follow Armchair Illini for all your written Illini news, both basketball and football wise. My tournament outlook is this, Kirkland. It's going to be a quick exit by the Illini in March. I think they might win their first game, but in the second round, I think they're going to be up against a team that's very experienced and has played together for a majority of this season and last season. And I don't know if Illinois has the guns to compete at that level. If Kasparis goes off for 40 points, all bets are off, but I need to see that a little bit more. So I really don't think a second weekend is going to be in Illinois' future.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. At this point, especially as we continue to lose. I mean, Austin, there's a chance that we lose 4 out of our last 5 games this year. 5 out of our last 6 if you include that Michigan State game. And if that's the case, you're talking about, possibly a 9, 10, if not worse. I know we have a
Do we
bunch
want to do the show from Dayton? Is what you're saying? Are we going to do a live Illini cast from Dayton, Ohio,
Oh no!
in a weekend in March?
Oh no! There's who knows, but it's just one of those where at the same, if we have in the first round have to play a really really good basketball team, I can see us losing in that first round. If we don't have to play a good basketball team, I can see us losing in the first round. But I can also see us scoring 92 points 2 games in a row on a Friday Sunday combo and sneaking into the Sweet 16. It really all hinges on the backs of Tommy, Will Riley, and Kasparis. There's not a lot of teams in the country that can match those 3 guys. And so, does someone else step up? If they do, then who knows? I'm still going to keep my optimistic hat on, but the likelihood of that happening as we see more and more into this season, I'm not exactly going to bank any money on that.
I am kind of scared that this Illini organization is starting to look a lot like the John Calipari Kentucky teams of the past few years, where there's so much reliance on freshmen, so much reliance on new players in their uniforms that it leads to long March weekends a little bit more difficult, where there's not the veteran presence. You're not having multi-year transfers. And I think Brad Underwood had that chemistry pretty locked down for a few years, but there's always an adaptation that needs to be made. And hopefully that this isn't where Brad Underwood is kind of stuck, and hopefully he can find a way to pivot off of this offseason. But this is a very difficult way to win in the Big Ten and in college basketball as a whole, unless you do have one of those mega freshmen. We'll see what Cooper Flagg does in the NCAA tournament, of course, but it is very tough sledding when you're relying on freshmen to lead the way and to have their head on their shoulders and be the leaders in those particular environments. So that is one thing I'm looking out for in this Brad Underwood future of roster building. Hopefully, guys like Jeff Alexander and Orlando Tigua help out with that, especially getting some multi-year posts and getting the European pipeline very refined and locked down. But man, this is going to be interesting for Brad in the upcoming offseason.
Yeah, it's one of those, Brad had the philosophy of get old, stay old,
Hmm.
and he had success with it. We've won the Big Ten conference, we've won Big Ten tournaments, and then UConn happened. last year, and he talked about it in the offseason. I think he saw up close what a national championship winner looks like. And I think, for him, and, whether you agree with this strategy or not, I think he realized that he can win the Big Ten Conference with, really good college basketball players. But if he wants to win the national championship, you need stars. You need NBA players. And that's kind of what shifted his strategy this offseason to go so aggressively at guys who, Illinois this year might have 2 first-round picks, one guy in the top 5, if not, maybe top 10. And we might be doing it again next year. It's just one of those, like, which strategy do you prefer? I would love to have a real sit down conversation with Brad where he was forced to tell me the truth on whether he regrets going so aggressively towards certain features and skills that he looks for in a basketball player. But yeah, I mean, Brad. The good part about Brad Underwood is he's not complacent. Like, he's willing to see where the game is going to go, and he's not stubborn. He will adjust to the game. The downside of Brad Underwood is sometimes he might be just too quick to make those adjustments. And, instead of easing it in, he might go all in, and then you have seasons like today or that we're going through right now where, the team is just, I just think, very disorganized.
Philip, transfer portal bargain shopping, AJ Store. Ooh.
Yeah,
No, thank you. No, thank you. That is definitely the bargain bin at Walmart where you're pulling out Ice Age 2 DVD and you're like, do I want Ice Age 2? No, not really. Philip again says Illinois is an NCAA tournament lock, just a matter of seeding, get to 20 wins, no lower than 6 or a 7 seed. Quite possibly that. Alex says, Sonny, where's the hoodie from?
It's Obvious Shirts. Big Austin, you probably know who they are. They're the big Cubs supporter.
They're going to say Justin Turner DFA. That's their next Obvious Shirt coming up in July. So get ready for that one. Philip says Kyle Neptune has a double-digit lead at UConn right now. That is right, on Fox Sports 1 leading into the Illini game. So maybe this is just the off year for Dan Hurley and Brad Underwood.
But, it's not just Dan Hurley. I mean, look at what's going on with North Carolina. Right? Yeah. There's a lot of teams. Kansas is struggling as of late. Like, a lot of names that you're used to having really good years. Like, Illinois is probably the most, the one people talk about the most from our conference. But there's a lot of brand names out there. It's funny, like, because of last year's March matchup, I still have a lot. The algorithm still sends me a lot of UConn content. And so I see their fan base. They're going, if we think Illinois fans are going nuts, UConn fans right now are going absolutely insane with what's going on with their season right now. So it's not just us, guys. We're not alone in this wacky 2024-2025 season.
Alex from Armchair Illini, Thomas Loft doing layups right now. All right, he's in. Hopefully, I don't know.
Are they going in?
We'll see. But Alex also said, and wearing a shirt with Sonny Verma's face on it. So that's a good NIL opportunity there for you internationally and in Champaign, Sonny, right there with Thomas Loft wearing that shirt. But I mean, going back to the national brands, and you can put Illinois in that conversation too. I mean, you even saw it in the football field. A team like Indiana made the college football playoff. Notre Dame made the national championship when everyone had them dead to rights in this new era of college football. I think we're seeing in college basketball that if you have a right coach and a right scheme and you have just enough NIL dollars to get a couple stud players, you have an opportunity to do some damage in your conference and do some damage in the NCAA tournament. I mean, NC State made a Final Four last year with DJ Burns carrying them. You look at the big branded teams this year, really only Duke is the one that's like, wow, they're great. And guess who they have? Cooper Flagg, the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft coming up in this summer. So I really think that this revenue sharing NIL era has changed college basketball forever, where yes, those blue-blooded teams will always have a certain advantage, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to stay at the top year after year after year after year. And I think people in the Big 12 are shocked how slow Kansas has been this year to really show up to things. I mean, it's been wild.
And this, like you said, this could be the future of college basketball. It's one of those where uh, I am kind of envious in some certain ways. We're going to edit this out afterwards of our friends to the east. With Purdue, like with what Matt Painter's doing. He just recruits to certain traits, and he really doesn't care about NBA aspirations. And unfortunately for me, it's a matter of they don't have a generational player anymore in Zach Edey. So is that ceiling over there limited? Yeah. But that's also a team who I think for the next half dozen years is going to win 20 plus games every single year and is not going to go through the up and down roller coaster ride that we do here in Champaign. Brad Underwood, God bless him, but he's going to cost me 3-4 years of my life with my blood pressure now that I've hit my early 40s. So who knows?
I mean, it's kind of like, what do you want out of your basketball program? Do you want the 50-50 shot that you're going to be a top four seed in the Big Ten tournament, or a 5 through 8 in the Big Ten tournament and maybe not get a great run in the NCAA tournament? Or do you want the lottery ticket where everything can go right in a season? You have such a high ceiling that a national championship is in the far distance at the beginning of the season, where you can like actually attain it. And yet certain things could happen on your roster, and you're kind of in the position where Illinois is at right now, where it's like, oh, there's a lot going wrong at this moment. You still see like if the talent's all shooting on all cylinders, then a national championship can still happen. But there's a lot of murkiness that develops at the end of the year, where you're like, oh, there's some injuries, guys aren't playing the best. This didn't gel like we thought it was going to gel. It's really all about what you are what your aspirations are for your college basketball program. And I wish it was a little bit of both, but you can't really pick that avenue anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I have certain feelings now, but that's probably a topic for the off season. I want to wait to see how this year ends up. Who knows? We might have a little postseason success that we didn't think we'd have, and then everything starts making a little bit more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hypothetically, there could be an Elite 8 run where we're like, "Hey, this is all phenomenal." Kasparis led us, and Will Riley showed up and was making deep 3 pointers at the end of the shot clock. We're all fine. Morez Johnson came back for the second weekend, won us a game in the Sweet 16. Tomislav showcasing why he could be a late first round pick. I mean, there's so many still great things for this Illini basketball program, but my lord, it is murky at the moment, with a void of leadership on the court and a void of physicalness on the court as well. John Yee says that Morez suited up, going to play one-handed. I don't think that's the case. I think he's already been listed as out, John. So thank you for commenting that and getting some Illini fans' hopes up. But he is out for this game. Sonny, what is your prediction for this Illini Wisconsin game?
Every time I feel good about a game, it doesn't end up well. This one, I feel like a lot of people are counting Illinois out. And if there's one good thing about Brad Underwood, it's he likes to play with his back to the wall. And so I think Illinois wins tonight. Again, Wisconsin's not really a team that can take advantage of both bigs being out. It's going to be tough. I mean, Wisconsin is one heck of an offense. What Illini fans think their offense looks like on occasion, Wisconsin does that almost every single day. So it's going to be a tough matchup, but I have Illinois winning 77-72.
I think Illinois loses by 10. I think this is a game where the Ewing theory does not prove true with Morez Johnson out. I think that the Illini are going to struggle from behind the 3 point line again. They're not going to be able to drive. Like, I just think that the scouting report is there for the Illini, and it's just keep your hands up on the 3 point line and pray they don't make them. And I don't think the Illini will make them. They haven't showcased it in a while that they can make it. And there's just not that second opportunity to score. John says small ball Hummer at the 5, and I wish that was the case. I wish I had confidence in Ben Hummerkaus to be the guy that carries this Illini team, but he hasn't proven it in a long time. Maybe since Oregon, where he had that great game. But it also helps when Kasparis Yakachonis is having a great game in Oregon as well. So I really don't think this is going to be an Illini win. And the streak of 2,000 something days, the last time Illinois lost to Wisconsin, is going to be wiped out. So Illini lost by 10 tonight, but hey, you can make fun of me tomorrow. So this is the Illini Cast, part of the Armchair Illini Network. Sonny, thank you, and we will be talking at the end of this week about this game and about the Illini and Duke Madison Square Garden game. This has been Illini Cast, part of the Armchair Illini Network.